Welcome to the Classic Soap Operas podcast. Today we're taking a really deep dive into a character who I think perfectly embodies that phrase love to hate in the world of daytime drama.
Oh, absolutely. A true icon.
We are talking about the unforgettable Delia Ryan from the beloved classic Ryan's Hope.
Delia Reed, Ryan Coleridge, Crane Coleridge. She had quite the journey.
She certainly did, and we have a fantastic collection of information here, actually provided by a listener who was really keen for us to explore the history and, the lasting impact of this specific character.
That's great. It's always good to dig into what people are curious about.
It is, and it's a really fascinating set of articles and details. It paints such a vivid picture of, chaos, neediness, and somehow the surprising resilience, too.
And that's our mission today, isn't it? To unpack all of that for you, we're going to explore her life, her core character traits, and the undeniable legacy she left behind. We really want to get into why she was such a central component of Ryan's Hope and why she still holds up as this iconic figure for fans, of the show and classic soaps in general.
Definitely. She's a character who generated just so much drama, so much frustration for the other characters and probably the audience, too.
Oh, for sure. But also, for many, this strange kind of affection, right? You couldn't help but watch her.
Exactly. All right, so let's maybe set the stage a little bit for anyone listening who might not be, intimately familiar with the world she lived in. Before we get really deep into Delia herself, let's talk about the show Ryan's Hope.
Good idea. Context is key.
It aired from 1975 to 1989, created by, the legendary writing team of Claire Levine and Paula Villamere.
And Ryan's Hope, it really arrived on the scene at such an interesting time for daytime TV. While, a lot of other soaps were set in these fictional kind of generic places.
Like Springfield or Pine Valley.
Exactly. Ryan's Hope was immediately different because it was grounded in a real, identifiable place. Washington Heights in Manhattan.
Yeah, and the information we have really emphasizes this grounding. It wasn't just a backdrop, it felt real.
Right. You hear about Mavis Parish being near the George Washington Bridge, characters actually interacting in specific Manhattan neighborhoods, mentions of Central Park.
Even those details, like mob-owned fishing boats operating out of Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn, it gave the show this unique texture, didn't it? This feeling of urban reality that felt really distinct.
It did. And that grounded setting was intrinsically linked to the show's core theme, especially in its early years. The narrative really revolved around the contrast between two main families.
Right, the Ryans and the Coleridges.
Exactly. You had the working class Irish-American Ryans headed by the very traditional Johnny and Maeve, and then their grown kids, Frank, Kathleen, Patrick, Mary, and later Siapan.
And then on the other side, the wealthier, more established Coleridge family, including the siblings Jill, Roger, and Faith.
And the early storytelling, it really leaned into the friction between those two worlds. You had the traditional, often, quite conservative values of the immigrant generation represented so powerfully by Johnny and Maeve.
Strong Irish Catholic roots.
Absolutely. And then you had the more liberated, sort of forward-thinking, often secular urban values being embraced by their adult children in the 1970s. It was all about that clash,
Yeah.
between the expected paths, lifetime marriages, sticking to church doctrines, ideas about chastity, and the realities of this new world, new era city life.
With all its complexities around relationships, careers, personal freedom.
Right. And that realism was, I think, one of the show's most celebrated strengths early on.
But, as we kind of hinted at, and the material we have makes this clear, while the show got praised for being realistic, it wasn't always strictly grounded, was it?
No, definitely not. There were certainly periods and some very specific storylines where things took a decidedly more, let's just say surreal turn.
And we are definitely going to dive into one of the most infamous examples of that later.
Oh, we have to.
And yes, it absolutely involves Delia herself.
Yeah.
It became this defining moment, didn't it, for both her character and that particular era of the show.
It really did. And it's a moment that perfectly encapsulates how Delia, even when caught up in the most outlandish plots, somehow stayed central to the whole viewer experience. But to understand that, we really need to go back to her beginnings.
Right. We have to talk about how Delia Reed first came into this world, or at least the world of Ryan's Hope. She was an original character created by Levine and Mayer, and she made her very first appearance right there in the pilot episode, July 7th, 1975. She wasn't someone they added later. She was woven into the show's fabric from day one.
And her backstory, which is detailed in the notes we've got here, it's just crucial for understanding the foundations of her character. Delia's early life was, marked by some significant instability and hardship.
Yeah, it sounds really tough. Her father went to a mental institution. Her mother died young.
Leaving her essentially orphaned and in the care of her older brother, Bob. The description we have is that she grew up lonely and confused, without much in the way of, guidance or security, maybe without a healthy blueprint for life and relationships.
That makes sense.
And this difficult upbringing, it clearly had a profound impact. While the material says she had a lot of love to give, it also states she seemed fundamentally unaware of the appropriate ways to show her love for others.
That's a key insight, isn't it? Not necessarily lacking feeling, but just deeply misguided in how she expressed it or tried to connect with people.
Exactly. And she found some early solace, some stability through the kindness of the Ryan family, particularly Maeve Ryan, the matriarch.
The heart of the family.
Right. Maeve showed her compassion and, we're told, even gave her food. So that early connection to the Ryans was really formative for her.
And that bond started early. And romantically, too, right? Her first love interest, according to the details here, was actually the youngest Ryan son, Patrick.
Mm-hmm. Patrick Ryan. Their relationship was an early part of her life, but it ended when Patrick, who was a budding medical student, chose to prioritize his really demanding medical career over their romance.
Ouch. A tough early lesson in love and priorities. Maybe that set a bit of a pattern for her.
It seems like it might have. That experience, maybe coupled with her inherent insecurity, seemed to lead her into another complex relationship. She got involved with this mysterious figure,
Victor Jerome.
right, who later turned out to be a known mobster. When she found out who he really was, she did break things off, recognizing the danger, or maybe just the inappropriateness of it all.
But not before getting pregnant.
Exactly. She soon discovered she was pregnant from that relationship. The result was a daughter, and she ultimately made the incredibly difficult decision to put that child up for adoption.
And that event, though it seemed kind of closed off at the time, would end up having huge repercussions decades later, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Massive. We'll get to that.
So, after the Victor Jerome situation, maybe seeking stability or trying to reconnect with the family where she'd found some solace, she turned to Patrick's older brother, Frank Ryan.
Mm-hmm. They reportedly fell for each other and actually got married in 1970, which was 5 years before the show even premiered.
Right. So by the time we meet her in July 75, she's already Frank Ryan's wife. But the marriage is clearly troubled.
Yeah, it was already strained, even before we tuned in. While Frank was in law school, he was having an affair with Gillian Coleridge.
From the other prominent family. Always circling back.
Always. And Delia, maybe seeing the writing on the wall or just desperate to hold on to whatever security that marriage represented, she got pregnant.
And the information suggests she actually believed this pregnancy would somehow save the marriage or stop Frank from leaving her for Jill.
It seems that way, which, again, is just a classic example of her trying to use external circumstances, like having a baby, to fix an internal or relational problem. It really highlights that lack of awareness about healthy dynamics we talked about earlier.
Okay, so that really sets the stage perfectly. She's the insecure wife of Frank Ryan, already feeling threatened by Jill Coleridge. She's got this history of difficult relationships and this deep need for security and love. And this brings us right into the heart of the show's early years, say 1975 to 1989, where Delia's pattern of manipulation, causing trouble, and just driving the plot really takes off.
Oh, yeah. This era is where her legendary status as a catalyst is absolutely forged. We see all those insecurities and those misguided attempts to find love and security just translate into increasingly dramatic and often pretty harmful actions.
Let's start with that moment. Right in July 1975, very early in the show's run. Frank, he's at Riverside Hospital. He confronts her, asks for a divorce. What's her reaction?
Immediate and violent.
Yeah.
She angrily pushes him down a set of stairs.
Wow.
The notes say he nearly died from the fall, but maybe still holding on to some hope or maybe a sense of protection, he actually covered for her, told people it was an accident.
Trying to salvage something, even as it was ending.
Seems like it. But that incident, gosh, it's just incredibly impactful as an introduction to her volatility. It immediately signals that Delia isn't just, passively needy. She's capable of these explosive reactions when she feels threatened or rejected.
Pushing your husband down the stairs. That's extreme.
It is. And Frank covering for her just adds another layer of dysfunction that defined their initial dynamic. It's not just anger. It feels like desperation just boiling over.
And she didn't just lash out at Frank, did she?
Oh.
In November 76, she physically confronted his lover, Jill Coleridge.
Right. The details say she shoved Jill, causing her to fall over her son Little John's tricycle and get injured.
Falling over the tricycle.
Yeah, that detail is kind of poignant and tragic in its own way, isn't it? The violence happening right around the symbol of her son, the very child whose future she was, putting in jeopardy with her actions.
And this incident, it further enraged the Ryan family, right?
Yeah.
And crucially, it severely jeopardized her chances of getting custody of Little John in the divorce.
Exactly. It's a clear pattern emerging already. Her desperate actions to protect what she sees as her marriage, her son actually end up undermining her goals and pushing away the very people she needs.
So by February 1977, the marriage to Frank is well and truly over. The notes confirm he finally divorced her because she had started an affair with Dr. Roger Coleridge.
Jill's brother.
Jill's brother, keeping it in the family, or rather the two families.
So she moves from one Ryan brother to a Coleridge sibling. But as is pretty typical with Delia, this wasn't exactly a smooth transition to a stable relationship. After the divorce from Frank, she apparently turned back to Patrick, her first love.
Yeah, the history reveals she seduced Patrick, which led him to propose marriage after she announced she was pregnant.
And here's where the deception really reaches a new level.
Mm-hmm.
On April 1st, 1977, April Fool's Day, fittingly, she secretly miscarried.
Oh, no.
But she didn't tell Patrick. Instead, she went through with the marriage just weeks later, based entirely on a lie about carrying his child.
That's audacious.
It really is. And the material details that during this marriage to Patrick, her schemes to keep him just got more and more elaborate. She resorted to faking another miscarriage and even faking mental breakdowns to get his sympathy and keep his attention focused on her.
Wow. It just underscores that profound neediness we talked about. She wasn't building a relationship on honesty. She was manufacturing crises.
Creating constant drama to keep him hooked. It's a tragic cycle of insecurity and manipulation, really.
And this unstable marriage, it eventually led to a violent confrontation between them, didn't it? Patrick was struggling, reportedly turning to drugs.
And he pushed Delia down the stairs. Similar to what she did to Frank, but this time she was injured. She was temporarily blinded by the fall.
And in a move that just cemented her reputation for manipulative drama. Even after she got her sight back.
She chose to fake blindness.
Unbelievable. Leveraging a real injury for continued sympathy and control over Patrick. It just speaks volumes about her distorted view of relationships and honesty.
It really does. But the truth, as it always seems to in soaps, eventually came out.
How did that happen?
Patrick discovered she was faking the blindness during a cruise they took in April 1978. And when they got back to Riverside, he apparently learned the full extent of her other deceptions from the past year, getting confirmation from Roger and Faith Coleridge.
So it all unraveled.
Completely. And this cascade of revelations led to a really pivotal family moment. The notes describe the Ryan family confronting Delia about everything. The lies, the manipulations, the faked illnesses, her crimes, as they put it.
And after being hurt and deceived so many times.
They made the difficult decision, as the source puts it, to detach from her behavior, which is powerful, isn't it? The family that initially offered her solace finally reached their limit and set this firm boundary against her destructive patterns.
So what happened after that? After the confrontation and the annulment of the marriage to Patrick in September 78?
Well, Delia did enter therapy. It seemed like it could be a turning point, maybe a chance for her to actually address the root causes of her behavior.
Did it work?
For a time, it seemed like things might change. Roger Coleridge came back into her life. But instead of condemning her, he apparently offered a different kind of support, telling her she was fine just the way she is.
Interesting advice.
Isn't it? He reportedly helped her establish some independence, and they actually got married in October 1978. Her second marriage to Roger, offering a different dynamic than her relationships with the Ryan brothers.
And this period saw a bit of a shift in her focus too, right? The notes mentioned she got heavily involved in the stock market.
Yeah, and her investments actually started paying off. For a moment, it looked like she might find security through financial independence, not just through romantic relationships.
But that didn't last either.
Nope. Roger reportedly suspected her of cheating with her stockbroker. Whether it was true or not, the suspicion was enough, and he divorced her. So that avenue for a stable, independent life also crumbled.
Back to square one. Sort of.
Yeah.
So after the divorce from Roger, she tried another path to independence, opening her own restaurant, the Crystal Palace.
And while running the business, she got involved with a Ryan family cousin, Barry.
And just when you might hope for maybe a quieter period for her.
Delia delivered another shockwave. When she found Barry cheating on her, her reaction was, well, predictably extreme.
What did she do?
She ran him over with her car.
Oh, my God.
And then, in this chilling act of self-preservation, she framed her former sister-in-law, Faith Coleridge, for the crime.
Framing Faith. That feels like a step beyond desperation into something much darker. Malicious, even.
It was definitely one of her most infamous early acts. It wasn't just manipulation, it felt like outright criminality.
So what happened with the restaurant, the Crystal Palace? Did that survive?
Unfortunately, no. Despite her earlier stock market success, the notes indicate she didn't have the consistent finances to keep it going. She eventually lost it to mob boss Joe Novak, and the restaurant shut down in 1982.
Another dream dashed. And then, by November 1983, Delia left Riverside entirely.
Yes. The reported reason was a job offer elsewhere, but the information clarifies this was actually orchestrated by Frank Ryan and Ray Woodard.
Why?
Their specific goal was to get Delia out of town so Frank could secure sole custody of their son, Little John, essentially removing her from the boy's daily life. It just highlights the ongoing conflict and the deep distrust the Ryan family still had towards her.
But Delia rarely stays out of the picture for long, does she? She resurfaced on June 15th, 1984.
Marrying wealthy oil man Matthew Crane.
Another classic Delia move, perhaps, seeking financial security and status through a rich husband.
Seems like it.
Huh?
But the material notes this marriage also dissolved quickly, reportedly because of her affair with someone named Steve Latham. After that divorce, she relocated to California.
So these early storylines, really from 75 through the mid-80s, they absolutely cemented Delia's identity for viewers, didn't they?
Completely. They show her constantly struggling, driven by that core neediness, but always falling into these patterns of manipulation, deception, and causing just significant disruption and trouble for everyone around her, especially the Ryans, who were her first real connection.
Yeah, that description of her being the catalyst for many of the show's storylines during this era feels spot on.
It's not an exaggeration at all. Her inability to behave conventionally, her capacity for sudden, dramatic action, whether it's pushing someone, faking something, framing someone, it provided the friction and conflict that propelled so much of the plot.
Yeah.
She was like the engine of chaos.
So after her time in California, she made her big return to Riverside in September 1986. What brought her back?
The immediate reason was a family event, the christening of her grandson, Owen.
Oh, right. Little John's son. He must have been a young adult by then.
Yeah, around 19 or so. But, in true Delia fashion, her return wasn't just about warm family feelings. Almost immediately, she reportedly set her sights back on Roger Coleridge.
Again, even though he was married.
Yep. Determined to win him back from his current wife, Maggie Shelby. Old habits and old loves die hard for Delia, it seems.
And this rekindled fixation on Roger led to one of the more memorable storylines from her later period, right? Involving kidnapping.
Oh, yeah. The notes mention Delia actually kidnapped the pregnant Maggie, and then somehow was present and even helped when Maggie unexpectedly went into labor and delivered her daughter, Olivia.
Wait, she kidnapped the wife of the man she wanted and then helped deliver their baby.
Exactly. It's simultaneously horrifying and kind of darkly comedic, isn't it? It just showcases that unique blend of desperation and twisted agency Delia had. She could create utter chaos and then somehow just be in the middle of the absurdity she created.
What happened to Maggie after that?
Unsurprisingly, she eventually left town, which predictably cleared the path for Roger and Delia to reconnect once again.
And perhaps incredibly, given their whole history.
They remarried on January 9th, 1989, which was actually in the very last episode of Ryan's Hope. They literally walked off into the sunset of the series finale together.
Wow. That's quite an endpoint for her journey on the show. After all the chaos, the marriages, the betrayals, she ends up back with Roger.
It is fascinating. However, her return in '86 also came with a reality check about her finances. Despite marrying that wealthy oil man, Matthew Crane...
He didn't leave her rich?
Apparently not. It was Maggie Shelby who exposed that Matthew Crane had passed away, leaving Delia basically destitute, which is why she ended up moving back in with Johnny and Maeve Ryan and her grandson, Oni.
Back under the Ryan roof. And the notes also mention a brief foray into local politics during this time.
Yeah, in September '87, she became the campaign manager for Dakota Ryan.
Who was Dakota?
Johnny Ryan's younger son, so Frank and Patrick's half-brother. He was running for district leader.
And Delia ran his campaign.
She did, which saw her interacting with powerful figures like politician Malachi Malone, whom she contacted for financial backing. The relationship was described as professional, sometimes personal. Dakota won the election, but The material mentions he quickly got involved in taking bribes. So Delia's involvement shows her still gravitating towards power and questionable ethics, staying connected to the Ryan family's public life, even while living with them.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's talk about something else that's pretty remarkable about Delia's history on the show. The casting. It wasn't just one actress, was it?
No, not at all. It's quite a list for a single character. The role of Delia Reed Ryan Coleridge Crane was ultimately played by 5 different actresses during Ryan's Hope's run.
5?
Yeah. But Eileen Kristen is, without a doubt, the actress most associated with Delia. She played her for the longest total time across 3 different stints.
Okay, let's trace that. Eileen Kristen originated the role right from the pilot, July 7, 1975. She established the character, played her through all that early chaos with Frank and Patrick, the first marriage to Roger.
Right. And she left the show in late 1978. Her last appearance then was January 5, 1979.
So who came next?
Well, the producers needed someone quickly. While they searched for a more permanent replacement, an actress named Robin Millen stepped in for a very brief time. Just 5 episodes between January and February 1979, kind of a placeholder.
Gotcha.
And then Randall Edwards took over officially, starting February 27, 1979. And she held the role for a pretty significant period, carrying Delia through several years of storylines until early March 1982.
How were these actresses received, especially following Kristen, who made such an impact?
Well, Eileen Kristen was a breakout star from the get-go. Reviewers absolutely raved about her. We have quotes saying she portrayed Delia's bitchiness so convincingly, played her to perfection.
High praise.
Definitely. She won the Afternoon TV Award for Best Actress in 1978, earned Soap Opera Digest nominations later, and even ranked high on that We Love Soap's list of greatest soap actresses. She really defined the role initially.
And Randall Edwards, stepping into those big shoes.
She also found acceptance. The information says fans immediately took to her portrayal. One critic, John Angudas, praised Edwards for making the character multidimensional, suggesting she brought different layers to Delia.
Interesting, so maybe a different take on the character.
Possibly. Another critic, Linda Hirsch, noted Edwards' popularity, but also expressed some skepticism about whether the character could realistically revert back to Kristen's portrayal if Kristen returned, precisely because the 2 actresses were seen as so different.
Yeah, that makes sense. Different actresses bring different nuances.
Absolutely. And that difference is key. Despite Edwards' success, there was this sense among some, reportedly including Eileen Kristen herself, that only Kristen could truly capture the unique, specific essence of Delia.
Like she owned the role.
Kind of. Celie Graves, writing in 1988, echoed this, saying the character resisted anyone else's efforts to bring out her distinct qualities. It suggests there was just something inherent in Kristen's portrayal, an energy, a timing, an interpretation that felt like the definitive Delia to many.
So going back to the casting timeline, Randall Edwards left in early 1982.
Reportedly let go in late February 82, and this departure paved the way for Eileen Kristen's first return to the role, starting early March 1982.
Why did she come back then?
Well, the notes mentioned she'd recently had a role on One Life to Live as Georgina Whitman that hadn't quite worked out, so she was available to return to Ryan's Hope.
But her second run wasn't that long.
No, not as long as her first or her final one. She was reportedly fired again in 1983, this time apparently due to dealing with a thyroid illness, a real-life health issue that was impacting her performance.
Okay, so Kristen out again. Who next?
After Kristen left in 83, the search continued. They cast Robin Mattson, who was already a big name in daytime for playing Heather Weber on General Hospital.
Oh, wow. Heather Weber. That's a casting coup.
It was. Mattson debuted as Delia on June 15th, 1984.
How long did she stay?
Relatively brief. She was initially contracted for just 6 months. ABC reportedly wanted to sign her longer term, but negotiations failed. She left in December 1984, possibly influenced by pilot seasons starting in Hollywood.
So that's 4 actresses. Who was the 5th? Or rather, who finished the run?
It circled back. For the final years of the show, Eileen Kristen made her 3rd and longest return.
3rd time's the charm.
Apparently. Her return was announced in August 86. She reappeared on screen September 5, 1986, and she stayed as Delia right through all the remaining storylines, including that final remarriage to Roger, until the very last episode on January 13th, 1989.
So Eileen Kristen really bookended the character, didn't she? Originated it, came back briefly, and then saw it through to the end.
Exactly. So while other talented actresses played the part and had varying degrees of success, Kristen ultimately became synonymous with Delia. The lasting sentiment, like Michael Fairman noted in 2023, is that fans will always remember her portrayal as the definitive one. It's pretty rare for a role with multiple actors to be so strongly tied to just one.
Okay, let's pivot now and use the details we have to dig a bit deeper into the essence of Delia's character. We've gone through her chaotic actions, the casting, but what was really at the core of who she was?
Well, the characterizations provided give us some key insights. The most prominent one, as you mentioned earlier, is that she was the quintessential love-to-hate character.
Right. What does that really mean in practice?
It means viewers were often frustrated, angered, maybe even appalled by her behavior, the manipulations, the self-centeredness, all the trouble she caused. But they were also compelled to watch her. They were invested in her story, maybe even rooting for her despite themselves, or just turning in to seeing what outrageous things she'd do next.
That magnetic quality, even in her worst moments.
Exactly. That pull is central to her iconic status. Another key description notes her habit of dealing with situations in ways that consistently caused even more trouble.
Not just making bad choices, but making things worse.
Yeah, it implies this fundamental lack of foresight, maybe an inability to learn from consequences. Her attempts to secure love or stability lying, framing someone, marrying for money, they inevitably backfired and created bigger problems for everyone, including herself. It's like the cycle of self-sabotage driven by desperation.
We also have that quote that gives a really stark assessment of her perspective. Delia lives her life unaware about anything that isn't important to her. If it doesn't involve her in some way, she doesn't care what's happening or to whom it's happening.
Oof. That paints a picture of profound self-absorption, doesn't it? Just this narrow focus on her own needs and desires, excluding empathy or consideration for others.
It does. But then that self-centeredness, it ties back to her difficult beginnings, doesn't it?
Exactly. That other quote we have about her backstory says she growed up without any guidance or security. A lot of love to give, but is unaware of the appropriate ways to show her love for others.
So the framing suggests her destructive behavior might not have stemmed from pure malice.
Right, but maybe from this deep well of insecurity and a fundamental misunderstanding of how to build healthy connections, it gives a more complex lens.
So were her actions pushing Frank, shoving Jill, faking pregnancies, framing Faith, were they just evil? Or were they these desperate, misguided attempts of a deeply insecure woman acting out of panic and confusion?
The information really allows for both interpretations, I think, and that ambiguity is part of what made her so compelling. She could be absolutely awful, but then you get these glimpses of her vulnerability, her stated desire for love that prevented her from just being a cartoon villain.
Her actions caused all these machinations, yes, but as summarized, it was often all in her efforts to find love.
Precisely. It made her actions feel, maybe in a twisted way, understandable, even if they were unforgivable. That complexity is why she wasn't just a plot device. She felt like a real, layered person, even if those layers were often buried under chaos.
And that's key for a love-to-hate character, isn't it? You need that spark of humanity underneath the villain.
Absolutely, to keep the audience invested emotionally, not just wanting the character gone.
Okay, we talked about the show's general realism being a strength, but we also mentioned those times things went a bit off-piste. The material refers to a period where storylines took a distinct turn for the surreal.
Yes, and this shift is noted as happening after Claire Labine and Paula Villamere sold Ryan's Hope to ABC in 1979. The rising cost of producing a daily drama was reportedly a factor.
So maybe the network or new writers went for more sensational plots to grab attention or maybe even cut costs on complex character stories.
That seems to be the implication. And the list of plot points from that era definitely sounds different. We're talking alleged takeoffs of popular movies.
Like what?
King Kong, On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, Jaws, Manhattan, The Godfather, The French Lieutenant's Woman, even a Queen Mummy storyline apparently inspired by Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Wow. That sounds less like gritty Washington Heights and more like, a Hollywood backlot.
Exactly. And the absolute pinnacle of this surreal period, the storyline that became legendary and, for many, infamous, it involves Delia directly.
This is it. The Prince Albert, the gorilla storyline.
That's the one. Reportedly aired around March 31st, 1980, during Randall Edwards' time as Delia.
And the scene. Describe the scene.
A gorilla named Prince Albert drops Delia Coleridge off a tower.
Just drops her off a tower.
Yep. As the notes explicitly state, an obvious homage to the iconic scene in King Kong.
What was the reaction?
Reportedly, immediate and widespread mockery and disbelief. Everybody laughed, it was mocked, seen as this grotesque attempt to cash in on a movie moment, totally out of character for the show's established gritty tone. It kind of became shorthand for when Ryan's Hope lost its way.
But there's another side to it.
Well, what's fascinating is the counter-narrative from those who were more involved or watching closely. They offer a different perspective. They describe the plot not just as this random, bizarre event, but as Delia, who was emotionally at loose ends at the time, finding an unlikely confidant in Prince Albert at the zoo.
A confidant. In a gorilla.
That's the idea. The description of their camaraderie is surprising. Sweet, moving, unexpected. The thought was that Delia, struggling to connect with people, found this non-judgmental relationship with the animal.
You had to accept the premise of the guy in the suit, though.
Of course. But the description says Randall Edwards, playing Delia, sold the hell out of it, making the emotional connection believable within the show's reality.
And Randall Edwards herself commented on it later.
Yeah, reflecting on it years later as a psychologist, she said performing those scenes, even with the actor in the suit, gave her some of her most personally emotional moments. She saw Delia's connection to the gorilla as symbolizing her fundamental yearning for acceptance and love, which Edwards felt was Delia's prime motivation for everything.
Wow. She even praised the actor in the suit.
Donald Van Horn, yeah, she praised his acting, especially how much emotion he conveyed with his eyes.
And even Claire Labine, one of the original creators, defended it.
Yep. Years later, she said, "I'd do that again. I loved those scenes." She explained her intention was for it to be a story about alienation, with Delia finding connection where she least expected it.
So you have this huge contrast. Public perception of pure absurdity versus the internal view of it being this poignant exploration of Delia's core needs, just through a very unusual lens.
Exactly. It wasn't just a gorilla dropping a woman for them, it was a woman being dropped by the only being she felt truly accepted her at that moment.
It really makes you think about the unique space soaps occupy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can real emotional truth be conveyed through plots that seem, on the surface, totally ridiculous?
For the creators and the actress, the answer seems to be yes. They saw the metaphor while many viewers maybe just couldn't get past the literal image. It's a fascinating example of how different people can interpret the same story.
All right, let's jump forward now. Many, many years after Ryan's Hope ended in '89. Decades later, in 2013, Delia Ryan actually resurfaced on another ABC soap, General Hospital.
Which is still going strong today. Yeah, that was a huge moment for classic soap fans. General Hospital brought Delia into its world through a major reveal.
What was the reveal?
She was the previously unknown, long-lost mother of the show's popular, formidable villainess, Ava Jerome, played by the brilliant Maura West.
How did they connect that?
Through Delia's early relationship with mob boss Victor Jerome. Remember the daughter she put up for adoption way back before Ryan's Hope even started?
That was Ava. Wow.
That was Ava Jerome. It tied the history of Ryan's Hope right into the modern canvas of General Hospital.
And excitingly for fans, who did they bring back to play Delia?
It had to be her, Eileen Kristen, cementing her status as the definitive Delia. Reports surfaced in early October 2013, and she popped up in a preview on October 25th.
And the head writer at the time confirmed it.
Ron Carlivati, yeah. He confirmed her reprise on Twitter. She appeared for 2 episodes, October 28th and 29th, 2013, officially establishing Delia as Ava's biological mother.
Did she come back again after that?
She did. Kristen confirmed more appearances shortly after, returning for 4 more episodes in late February 2014. And the notes indicate she was back again later that year, taping scenes opposite Michelle Stafford in May 2014.
What was Delia up to on General Hospital? Had she changed much?
Well, her appearances were brief, but they showed she hadn't entirely changed her spots. She was reportedly visited by characters Sam Morgan and Silas Clay, who forced her to admit being Ava's mother. She later reunited with Ava in New York. Imagine that meeting, and even came to Port Charles GH's setting to try and run interference for Ava, especially with mobster Sonny Corinthos.
Still getting involved in shady dealings to protect her family. Or at least her newfound daughter.
Seems like it. When Ava revealed she'd killed Sonny's girlfriend, Connie Falconeri, Delia reportedly tried to steal information implicating Sonny in a different murder, hoping to use it as leverage to protect Ava.
Did it work?
Nope, she got caught and was sent packing back to New York.
And there was a nod to her origins, too. Something about Ryan's bar.
Yes. When Ava was presumed dead at one point, she apparently met up with Delia at Ryan's bar in New York to let her know she was alive. And the notes add that Delia was actually running Ryan's bar at this time.
Implying Johnny and Maeve had passed away.
That's the presumption, yeah.
Hmm.
Allowing Delia to take over the iconic family establishment, a small but really significant detail connecting her back to her roots.
And the scheming continued even then.
Oh, yeah. The info details Delia and Ava later worked together to give Ava a new identity using a dark-haired lookalike. And in a classic soap twist, Delia claimed this lookalike was a twin sister she had also given up for adoption years ago.
A secret twin, of course.
Right. So even decades later on a different show, Delia was still capable of concocting these elaborate, slightly outlandish lies to protect herself and her daughter. The apple didn't fall far from the tree, and Delia hadn't lost her touch for dramatic deception.
It's fascinating that even as recently as 2023, Eileen Kristen was talking about maybe returning to General Hospital again as Delia.
Mm-hmm. And the quote we have from her is very telling about how she sees the character's potential. She said, "It would be nice if Delia lived for real. It's like Delia in people's imaginations. I'm sure I will be making some kind of appearance on that show at some point."
But she also said something about her not being used enough.
Yeah, she added, "It's too bad because Delia could be causing a lot of trouble. They never exploited it for what it was worth."
Wow. So she feels there was more chaos Delia could have caused on GH.
Definitely. It suggests Kristen believes the character, even in brief appearances, still holds immense potential for drama and conflict. Like, GH maybe didn't fully lean into the level of machination that defined Delia on Ryan's Hope. For her, Delia's essence is tied to stirring the pot. She clearly feels there was more stirring to be done.
Looking back at her whole history then, from Ryan's Hope in '75 to GH in the 2010s, it's just undeniable she left a huge mark on daytime TV.
Oh, absolutely. That description of her as a central component, a catalyst, the breakout character of Ryan's Hope, feels totally accurate based on everything we've discussed. She is, without question, considered one of the most iconic characters in daytime history by so many fans.
And the reception she got reinforces that, doesn't it? Us Weekly ranking her the #1 villainess in soaps way back in 1977.
Right, early in her run, speaks volumes about how quickly she made an impact and became this defining example of that character type.
And while we acknowledge the other actresses, like Randall Edwards, were accepted and praised, there's that recurring theme that Delia somehow resisted anyone else's efforts, that Kristen's portrayal was just definitive.
It really seems that way. Michael Fairman's 2023 quote sums it up nicely. Fans will always remember Kristen's Delia, noting she definitely stirred the pot, was responsible for many machinations, all in her efforts to find love.
So what does this enduring legacy tell us about soap audiences? It seems clear we're not just tolerant of, but often actively drawn to these complex, infuriating characters who reliably cause trouble.
Mm-hmm. Especially when they're portrayed with depth, that touch of vulnerability, and that unique spark which Eileen Kristen clearly provided. That capacity for chaos doesn't alienate viewers. It makes the character unforgettable, and even in that love-to-hate way, kind of beloved.
Her neediness, her misguided attempts at connection, the sheer, unpredictable chaos she generated, those were the ingredients that made Delia Ryan a soap opera legend.
Exactly. The love-to-hate thing works because they aren't purely evil. They're often deeply flawed, driven by relatable, if exaggerated, human needs, like wanting love and acceptance. Delia embodied that paradox perfectly. You might groan at her latest scheme, but you rarely wanted to miss it.
Frustrating, sometimes awful, but her vulnerability, her desperate search for belonging, and just her sheer ability to turn any situation upside down made her absolutely essential viewing.
She was chaos made compelling.
And she certainly did disrupt everything around her with a certain style. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the unforgettable, maddening, and utterly iconic world of Delia Ryan from Ryan's Hope.
From her tumultuous early years, all the manipulations, faked pregnancies, multiple marriages, to her signature portrayal by Eileen Kristen that spanned decades, and yes, even that unexpectedly poignant moment with a gorilla, Delia Reed left an undeniable, indelible mark on daytime history.
It really is fascinating looking back and seeing how a character described as, unaware, deeply needy, constantly causing trouble could become so beloved, so enduring. Even managing to pop up decades later to stir the pot on another show, it just speaks volumes about the power of a compelling character, compellingly played.
It really does. And it leaves you with a thought to maybe mull over. In the high-stakes, dramatic world of soap operas is a character's ability to cause endless trouble, to relentlessly stir that pot, actually the secret ingredient to their longevity and iconic status.
Do the troublemakers linger longer and become more memorable than the heroes? Good question.
Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. If you enjoyed learning all about Delia Ryan and exploring the rich history of Ryan's Hope, please do take a moment to like this episode, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of our future deep dives, and definitely leave a comment sharing your own thoughts on Delia, or maybe suggesting other classic soap characters or topics you'd love for us to explore.
Yeah, we absolutely love hearing from you and getting your insights.